Hello everybody, welcome to the latest video on my Pantheon YouTube channel, Life Taps and Backstabs. This is my YouTube channel where I gush uncontrollably over my three favourite classes in Pantheon, which are the Rogue, the Necromancer and the Dire Lord. The Rogue is just phenomenal at the moment. He's hands down my favourite class in Pantheon. The character development and the ability line and how the class is kind of led through the early levels is utterly fantastic, and as you get a higher level as well, the rogue just really comes into its own and becomes really powerful. And I thought I would share some tips, some thoughts and some things that I try and think about whenever I am soloing and also in group play. So I thought this would be a really interesting video to do. I've got some more videos lined up as well, including a really cool one about all our utilities and how they sort of work together, and what those utility lines might do in the future, and some ways and directions in which we could take them. So that was going to be interesting as well. But today's video, I just want to talk about group play and solo play. So we are currently down in Halnir's Cave in this group. This is a guild group, a really cool guild group. We've got Nightbanes in here, we've got Satoko, we've got Truck, we've got some awesome friends in here. I have an awesome time playing with them. And we are, as you can see, we're down in Halnir's Cave. We've pulled an Ultherian Disciple, and I actually make a mistake here, which we're going to talk about in a second once we've paused it. But the first thing that I'm doing in here is I'm trying to get my debuffs on. There are some important things about playing as a rogue in a group. In my opinion, the rogue provides an awful lot of utility and help within a group. And one of the early things, and one of the important things that you need to be able to do as a rogue, is fit your equipment and your build and all your rotations around the group that you've got. Now this group we've got in here is very heavy melee focused, so straight away I'm going to be wanting to do some armor debuffs on the mob. So if you look at the debuffs which are on the mob at the moment, you've got the AC armor debuff technique, which is the first one. The second one is my corrosive brew, which drops the armor a further 25%, and then I've got a couple of dots on there, so a poison dot and a bleed dot. The bleed is really important in this group because we've got Nightbanes in the group. Nightbanes is a Dire Lord, and Dire Lords get double the healing from all their healing spells and abilities if I can make the mob bleed. So I'm always trying to get that bleed on there as early as I can as well to help out Nightbanes. But you will have noticed at the beginning of the fight I ran out and I misused my readiness. So if we just rewind a little bit, to here, I've got full readiness here. I'm going into the fight with full readiness. As a rogue, it's fantastic. As a stealth, you're always going into the fight with an absolutely full set of resources, full readiness, full opportunity, and you need to be able to use those effectively. Now, ordinarily, you want to use your readiness to try and get one of the debuffs off as quickly as you can. You want to use your opportunity to get the corrosive brew off as quickly as you can. But as you saw in this fight, I go into this fight and just kind of mess up the rotation a little bit. I do get the bleed on nice and early for Nightbanes to help out a little bit, and I do get the corrosive brew on there as well. But now I have used all my readiness clicking on the wrong, basically I was clicking on the wrong button, and I've put a poison on there rather than the armor debuff, which would turn that opening gap state which has just been put on, that little target, which would turn that into an AC debuff. And then at that point, right at the beginning of the fight, nice and early, we've got the armor is debuffed, and everybody in the group is then doing more damage on the mob for the rest of the fight. If I'm armor debuffing the mob at 50, 40, 30% health, then that's waste. I've not maximized the amount of damage increase that those armor debuffs are going to give. But you can see here I've run out of readiness, so I'm now waiting for my weapons to build up my readiness again so that I can go back in and I can actually get that armor debuff. So if we just kind of play it on here, hit. Another thing to notice is my weapon loadout. So one of the things about these guys is that they are always casting weapons. and I've now got my readiness, and there the armor debuff now drops in. I can press the correct button rather than hitting the poison dot. The poison dot is technique number 4, and the armor debuff is technique number 3, and my finger just slipped, I'm sure. But you'll notice here as well my weapon loadout, if we just kind of go on so you can see a little bit better. My weapon loadout is a hammer and a dagger. Now the dagger is just a really nice dagger. I think that this dagger is the Kyberian Fang as well. I'm fighting orange and red mobs, so I wanted the hit rating, so I've got the Kyberian Fang, and that's going to help me hit and help me land the techniques and the debuffs and things like that more than the damage which I'm doing. We'll get to the damage in a second. And then also the hammer which I've got the ambidextrous ability on, which you can see up in the buffs. Ambidextrous grants me a bonus depending on what weapon I have in my offhand. Now at the moment these mobs cast an awful lot of really annoying spells, and Nightbanes, myself and Saitoko are trying to interrupt all of those spells as often as we can. Now, if I have a hammer in my offhand, that also has a chance, I hate the fact that it just has a chance, it has a chance to stun the mob. So 5% of the hits will stun the mob, and that stun will obviously interrupt any of these spells as well. Really useful. Just those little kind of tiny 10% here and there that help make the group go nice and smoothly, and that's why I've got the hammer in the offhand, and that's why I'm using a dagger in the main hand. Now if the group is a little bit more comfortable, I could switch to a little bit more of a high DPS build and kind of drop the mob a little bit quicker in that way, but I kind of chose to go in this direction in this group because of kind of helping out, and my debuffs and my stun from my hammer is going to absolutely magnify all the good things that everybody else in the group is doing. So weirdly, as a rogue, you can be very selfless in a group and really help the group kind of shine, which is really awesome. So the final thing on here as well, you'll notice I've got a food and drink buff up as well. The drink buff is just Blackberry Sparkle, that's absolutely fine. But the food is a crit rating, so I always like to increase my kind of crit rating on these as well. Just kind of buffs my DPS a little bit. I'm an absolute dexterity whore in terms of a rogue. I like my dexterity as high as I can. During seasons, Sarlor had a dexterity of 72. I think he was buffed at 72, which is just ridiculous. He had a crit rating of 50%, so every 2 times he hit, one of them was going to be a crit, which was great. I loved it. Fantastic. I'm using a sort of a lower level dagger, and I'm using a I can't remember what the hammer is. I don't think the hammer is from Halnir's. I think the hammer is a nice kind of crafted hammer. So I'm not using optimized weapons, however I was topping out the DPS. So we've got a monk in here as well. Mikamal was also in the group. I was topping out Mikamal's DPS with this loadout as well, so it wasn't like I was hurting the DPS or my DPS for the group, taking these kind of lower level or lower choice weaponry. But I was benefiting the group in other ways, which was really cool, because the hit rating from the dagger obviously helps me land the debuffs and the technique debuffs, and the poison bleeds for Nightbanes, and the hammer is obviously helping stun the mob and hopefully interrupt those absolute pain of abilities that these ones have. Ultimately, here in these kind of groups, I'm just gonna let this play out. Ultimately, in these kind of groups, it's really important to get the debuffs in early. The earlier you can get the debuffs in and the things that benefit the group, the earlier you can get those in, the smoother the rest of the fight is going to go. Like I could have opened this up with a Sinister Strikes. I like to use Sinister Strikes sort of in the middle, after I've got all the debuffs down. I can use the Blackjack Kick to top my opportunity up, and then Sinister Strikes to buff my damage as I'm going through, because as we know, rogues do kind of front load their damage a little bit, so if I can keep the DPS a little bit higher in the middle, then I kind of like that. The fight generally aren't quite long enough to get 2 Sinister Strikes out, so I kind of pick where I want to put that Sinister Strikes in, and I try and get it into the middle, and then obviously I can maximize the whole length of the Sinister Strikes as well, rather than clicking it early, because I used to I like to click Sinister Strikes and then let a little bit of opportunity build up before I go in. So using Sinister Strikes in the middle, I prefer that over opening with Sinister Strikes and then backstabbing to get like maybe 50% more damage off that initial backstab with Sinister Strikes. It's far better to get those debuffs on there early, and then you're benefiting 5 other people, or up to 5 other people in the group, rather than just getting an extra 50 damage at the beginning of the fight. So that's the way I like to play. I like to kind of help. It's not really helping the group out. It is like magnifying and making the kills go safer and smoother and more efficiently, and like less stressful. Like there's less things that can go wrong in the fight, because we're doing little things like having a hammer so that we can maybe stun, having the bleed on so that the Nightbane's is healing for more, and then therefore there's less stress on the healer to heal the tank and things like that. So it's just like little things that you can do that help the fight and help the group go smoothly. And one of those things, like I say, is just trying to get those debuffs on early, prioritizing the debuffs, prioritizing helping that out, and talking to the other people in your group. Like in this group, Treyarch was an absolutely fantastic Necro. He is always opening gapping as early as he can so that I can get that armor debuff on. Alright, so let's have a look at a solo situation. So this is out in Eastern Plains. I'm soloing as a level 22 rogue. This is a Whitecon Forest Gleamer in front of me, and we're going to have a look at how we're going to go about soloing as a rogue. Now, first thing you have to do, obviously, is just check your surroundings. We don't want any ads. Like if you get an ad as a rogue, it's an absolute nightmare. So always check your surroundings. I've got my buffs up, I've got my poisons up. We've spoken about these before, in terms of making sure you have as many resources available to you during the fight. So I've got my poisons up on both daggers, or my spear and my dagger. I've got my food up as well, so I've got my crit food on. I bumped into a very, very kind cleric who threw me some cleric buffs as well, which is very, very nice of them. And if I could get shaman buffs as well, it would absolutely categorically help even more. Kills with shaman buffs go probably 20% better every single time, so that's really, really good. So first things that we do, as always, we're going to drop that trap down. Now you can, if you want to, and it was brought up on my other video as well, you can, if you want to, kind of wait that 15 seconds and then put another trap down, so you can pull it over 2 traps. Traps at this level are doing about 40 damage. So if you put 2 traps down, that's the same as like a non-crit backstab, which is really, really nice. So you could, if you wanted to, wait another 15 seconds, put another trap down, and then pull it over to the double traps, if you like. So Forest Gleamer, just a quick kind of check around again, make sure there's nothing around. We're going to trigger Sinister Strike, so we're getting a buff on that initial backstab. You can see the backstab was 136 there. I also follow it with a blackjack kick as well, just to make sure I've topped up my opportunity. So I go into the fight with 2, because I don't want to wait too long to waste all the Sinister Strikes buff. So I go into the fight with 2. I then use 2 for the Corrosive Brew as well, and then I use 1 for the Bloodletter. And let's carry this on here. So there's the Corrosive Brew, and if we just stop it here, I have 1 more. There we go. So if we just stop it here, I have now gone through all of my kind of opening damage. So as a rogue solo, it changes from a group, in terms of, in a group you are always front loading your debuffs as much as you can. When you are soloing as a rogue, you want to front load your damage as much as you can. One of the ways that you can do that is drop that Corrosive Brew on there nice and early as well, so that increases your damage as you're going through. And the kind of cooldown on that is quite good, so you can kind of drop that in nice and early, and then it helps with your Hidden Strike or Hidden Swing and Lucky Strike hits after you've got after this initial kind of dump of damage. So you can see there, I am now pretty much out of opportunity. I'm out of readiness. I've got corrosive brew on the mob. I've got 3 dots on the mob. I've done a backstab, I've done a lucky strike, and I've done a hidden swing. So I've got as much damage as I can on that mob. Now this is where rogue solo starts getting quite interesting, because we have to front load as much as we can. You can see we've lost about 40%. We've done about 40% damage to the mob. I'm always, when I'm soloing, I'm trying to pick mobs which don't have that many abilities. So they're not going to like tarsal flurry you and take all your health down and things like that. And also, I'll also try and pick mobs which will run away, because if the mobs are running away, we only have to do 85 to 90% damage on the mob, and then it will start running. Whereas a mob that doesn't run away is going to be hitting you for the entire 100% damage that you have to do. So always try and pick mobs that run away. We can caltrops them to slow them down, which is what that one opportunity is for at the end. And now this is where we have to control the pace of the rest of the fight. So I've got 90% health-ish, and the mob is down to 60% health. Now you can see what happens now. Now I've dumped all that damage on. This is where the fight slows down a little bit, and I need to control the pace. So next thing comes in, I've clicked Shadow Clone so I can dodge that next attack coming in, and we've nearly got the mob down to 50% health. I'm going to drag it over to, I drag it over badly, but we're going to drag it over to the trap. Trap does 40 damage, 39 fire damage with explosive trap, and then it's still got as I'm kind of pulling it away from this, it's still got the light bleed on it from the technique. It's still got the light bleed on it from Bloodletter. It's still got the poison from Twin Fangs, and it's still got the poison damage from my toxins as well. So it's still taking damage as I'm kind of kiting it and pulling it towards that trap. So if we carry on here and we just pause it here, so now you can see we're now just below probably 40%, and I've dropped a little bit more as well, because my damage has slowed down. So the damage of the mob and the damage for myself kind of moved down at the same level. So now it's at 40% health, but fortunately we front loaded a lot of our damage. Now one way that you can now control the pace of this fight now is by stunning it. So now I've stunned it. It's stunned with Flash Bomb. It now allows me to move around the back of the mob. I'm now down to 50% health, so I've used 50% of my health resource to try and kill this mob. So I can now Flash Bomb the mob, move around the back of it, take a backstab, and finish it off and make it run. So that is how we can kind of control the fight and control the pace a little bit as a rogue playing solo. And there he goes, drops and dies. As soon as the mob turns around and runs away, you've won the fight. You just need to kind of that's where you just chill and just kind of pick off the last little bit of damage. And obviously you've done the check beforehand and made sure that there's nothing around that might possibly aggro. Eastern Plains is really, really nice for this, because there's not a lot of things that aggro. There's wolves, there's some bears around. But the wolves and the lynxes, I think, are the only thing that aggro around this sort of area. So it's a really, really nice little area and little zone to kill in. And yeah, so that's soloing as a rogue. Now, like I say, I do have a couple of buffs from a cleric, but it's absolutely categorically easy to do as well. It's this kind of straightforward. There are some things I could have done better. I could have pulled it directly back to the trap a bit better. I missed, didn't quite remember where the trap was, so you can see I've kind of not quite pulled it back to the trap, so that could have been better. I could have turned and run a little bit smoother and not taken a few hits in the back. Remember, if you do turn your back on the mob, then you do just give up the chance to dodge. And the other thing that I could have done is I could have stunned it and then run over to the trap as well, but then I would have missed out on the backstab, if that makes sense. So yeah, just making use of as many things as you can, and then me trying to shadow walk, but he's still got a dot on me, so the dot just broke shadow walk. So there we go. Now back into shadow walk. And this is the final video which I'm going to show you, final clip. I'm trying to do my best to record as many. I'll just pause this as it comes in. I'm doing my best to try and record as many of these kind of group situations as I can, just to kind of help out with some of these videos and do some more of these videos to show you what I'm doing in groups and things, and what I'm doing solo, because rogues are an awful lot of fun, I promise. They're absolutely fantastic. Anyway, so I'm now down in this is Halnir's Cave again. I think this is a level earlier. I think I'm 20 at the moment. We're down at the Black Rose jail, and I'm in a small group this time. I've only got 5 people in this group. So I've got, again, it's Truck, we've got Fairweather, we've got Carlitok, who is an amazing enchanter, and we are pulling and killing all of these Black Rose guards. Now this is another kind of situation that we can do as a rogue, and we can kind of control, and we can mez and things like that. Now rogues with necromancers is fantastic. Rogues with enchanters is always good as well. Enchanters are just so good at mezzing. I just like to help out a little bit underneath, just in case. Like so, these 2 mobs come in. You can see that one of them has now been mezzed, but you can notice on the mob it's got 2 mezzes on it. It's got the enchanter mezz and the rogue mezz. I just like to kind of stay stealth just until I know that the 2 mobs are under control. So for instance, maybe the mez got resisted and my mez landed, so I can then kind of just take a second, make sure that the enchanter can kind of re-mez it, or the enchanter can mez it with his mez, and then I can kind of leave that and kind of turn my attention to the main mob. Why bother with a double mez? It's mainly just to help out. Like the groups, particularly when you're in like a low group like this, in terms of like we've only got 5 people, anything that goes wrong is going to be multiplied. Anything that goes wrong is going to have a chance of wiping the entire group. If you wipe the group, you're losing XP, you're losing time, everybody gets grumpy. So anything that you can do to help out and just ensure that nothing is going to go wrong, it is far better as a rogue to take 10 seconds just to make sure that everything is under control, everything is mezzed, everything is rooted, we don't get any unnecessary ads and things like that. It's far better to do that for the first 10 seconds of the fight, or the first 5% of the mob's kills health, than it is to ignore that, go straight to the mob, backstab it, and try and do as much DPS as you can as quickly as you can. Because if things go wrong, you are now out of stealth. It's going to take you resources to get back into stealth, to try to mez and root and things like that. I would like, just in case Fiosoa is watching, I would like another way to get into stealth that isn't flash bomb during a fight. That's just one little bit. But ultimately, it's far better just to kind of take your time. One of the things that Pantheon does really, really well is give you time during fights. Like if the shit hits the fan and everything goes wrong, you've still got plenty of time in there to just take a breath, drop back out into stealth, find the mob which is causing harassment, mez it, root it, stop it, do something. You do have plenty of time, and there's not very many situations where it's all like panic stations. And the start of the fight is obviously the cleanest. This is the cleanest time. You know where the mobs are coming. You can drop a root trap down, or a flash trap down. Flash traps are fantastic, by the way. Don't believe anybody who says that the flash traps are useless. Flash traps are fantastic. Disorientate, extend our mez, it's brilliant. So you can just drop a trap down, you can drop a mez down like this. Instant cast mez is fantastic, and it just really, really helps. So yes, it's far better to just be a bit aware at the beginning, make sure that everything's clear, make sure everything is under control, then you can turn, then you can go and debuff the mob and get everything else under control over there as well. So yeah, just a little bit of accountability, a bit of responsibility as a rogue, and you help make the groups go much smoother and cleaner and quicker. So as that comes in, we've got them both mezzed, or we got it mezzed. We get this one yoinked by Fairweather up here, and this is the mob that we're now going to start killing. And again, first things I want to be doing is trying to get a debuff on it. So I've got my armor debuff on there straight away. and then again, I'm not as efficient as I should be here. I've got the armor debuff on, and I've got the bleed on as well. Carlita Fairweather is a Dire Lord, so I want to try and get that bleed on as early as I can as well. So those first 3 debuffs on the mob that you see there, that are mine, are the 3 that I'm going to try and get onto every single mob, particularly if I'm grouping with a Dire Lord. So I want to get bleed on, I want to get an armor debuff, and I want to get my corrosive brew debuff. If I'm fighting with lots of casters in my group, I'm still going to put my corrosive brew armor debuff on, but I might swap my and actually at slightly higher levels you can actually use your offhand weapon, but until you get that that technique you can use a blunt weapon in your main hand, and then you can lower the magic resist as well. So if you've got like two wizards and a summoner in your group, stick a blunt weapon on. So you hit the mob with Lucky Strike. Lucky Strike is the one that if you have a piercing weapon it reduces the mob's armor. If you have a slashing weapon it reduces the damage that it does by 8%, and if you have a blunt weapon it reduces magic resist by 20%. Go and have a look at my technique video also on my channel if you want to learn a bit more about techniques and how they can kind of synergize with the rest of the group. But if I had 2 wizards and a summoner in my group, then I would either use a weapon, a blunt weapon in my main hand and use Lucky Strike to lower the magic resists, or at a slightly higher level I would stick it in my offhand, and then I would use Trick Shot, which would do exactly the same thing, but it does it related to my offhand as well, so that would lower the magic resist. So I always try to focus and kind of flex, if you like, my loadout and my rotations depending on who is in the group. Like, there is absolutely no point having a blunt weapon main hand even if it's a really good blunt weapon, there's no point having that in a melee focused group. Like if you've got a ranger, a monk, a dire lord, me as a rogue, a cleric, and I don't know, a warrior for an off tank, like that's just all melee DPS, so there's no point having a blunt weapon and lowering the mob's magic resist. So I'm always focusing and trying to help the group out, and I always like to say that it's really nice to be able to do a group, and then when the group finishes or when you leave the group, then they notice what you were doing, sort of thing. Like the kills slow down, or the mobs aren't quite as easily controlled, sort of thing. That kind of group play, getting those debuffs in there, we can just watch this fight play out now. And also, if you are, there's a couple of really cool classes which rogues synergize with. They synergize really well with necromancers and enchanters. Obviously, they synergize really well with dire lords, because dire lords like that bleed effect that we can put on the mob as early as they can. Dire lords have blood fiend, which gives them healing for every damage that they do with their weapons, but if the mob is bleeding, then they do double healing, so they get twice as much healing, which is really useful. As a necromancer, I can drop a flash trap, so if I get an ad and I've got a necromancer in my group, I will usually have, if you look on my utility bar here, I would probably drop caltrops out and stick flash trap in there, because as a mob comes in, if we get 2, I can drop a flash trap down, stun the mob, disorientate it, then I can mez it. If a disorientated mob, if I mez it, lasts twice as long, so it's nearly a 40-second mez then with smoke trick, which is absolutely fantastic. And then I can lock that mob down, keep it quiet, keep it out of the way, while the necromancer then comes back to the main mob, dots and debuffs the mob, turns his attention to the one that I've mezzed, and then starts crippling terror and mezzing and locking that ad down, while I then switch and then go on to the main mob. So necromancers and rogues are fantastic. Enchanters and rogues are obviously really cool. We can also drop the flash trap down and it extends the enchanter mez. Dire lords really cool. There we go. I just thought I would do this. It's just a really interesting kind of conversation on how rogues play, both in solo and in group play. In solo play, we're trying to absolutely front load all our damage, as much damage as we can front loaded. You can absolutely use Shadowfall in that front loaded attack. The only thing that I don't like about using Shadowfall, if we just go back to here, the only thing I don't like about using Shadowfall in here is that I don't tend to go into the fight with maximum resources, because Shadowfall uses 3 opportunity, and if I want to use Sinister Strike as well, I'm hitting Sinister Strike, I'm waiting 6 seconds then to get my 3 opportunities so I can use Shadowfall, and that's kind of using up 12 seconds, well 6 seconds of the 12 seconds of Sinister Strikes, so you don't get as much benefit. So it's all right using Shadowfall. If you like doing it that way, then that's really, really cool. I prefer going in and backstabbing. You'll notice I'm not using Waylay on this one. That's because I do that stun there halfway through. It just gives me a second just to kind of calm down, control the fight, control the pace a little bit, walk around the back, backstab it when I'm ready, and then carry on with the fight. But you can absolutely use Waylay as well. It's when you're soloing, it's a little bit more dependent on your loadout, and your rotations are a little bit more dependent on what weapon you're using and what weapon is your best weapon. If I had a damage 12 slashing weapon, I would use that, and I would put Waylay on. And then of course I wouldn't have to worry about getting behind the mob. I could just stun it and stand there, and then Waylay just before the stun breaks. Yeah, that's just all my thoughts. I hope you find that useful. Please drop any comments down below if you have any extra little tips for us rogues. Be really, really cool just to kind of swap some ideas. If you have a different rotation, or if you have an ability which you use that I haven't been using, and you want to explain how you use that, then drop that down below as well. Drop a like and a subscribe, and I'm sure I will see you all around Terminus very, very soon. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care and have a great weekend. And if you ever see me on Black Moon, come and say hey. Thanks. Bye-bye.